So Destiny refuses to condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk. He makes some good arguments, he makes some bad arguments. Here's the clip.
If it turns out to have been somebody with a leftist ideology who wanted to shut up Charlie Kirk, would you condemn that?
I won't condemn anything until the president of the United States can go on air and say, all of us need to calm down.
So you won't condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk until Donald Trump says
Piers,
something.
I'm a YouTuber. Leftists and Democrats have been condemning and turning down the temperature, condemning violence, turning down the temperature for a decade. Donald Trump can't go on TV and say, all of us need to calm down.
Right.
Part of what he said there is absolutely correct. The idea that nobody on the right, not even Trump, can do what every single other president, every single other Democrat in Congress has been able to do. Say that we should tackle gun violence and political violence is never okay. The fact that he hasn't been able to say that is completely absurd. Instead, he blames leftist messaging. And that's what Destiny should be talking about. You're allowed to say that murder is immoral. Like, trying to avoid saying that, you're losing an argument. You're allowed to play politics in arguments. Just like, don't tell everyone that that's what you're doing. Because Destiny is basically like, oh, I'm just here to play a political word game where I'm not going to say the thing that I obviously do believe, that murder is immoral, to try and win some political argument and give some credence to my other argument, my main argument, which would be that the left had nothing to do with this, and in fact, the right, if we're going to blame anyone on the political spectrum, had much more to do with this. Like they put the rubber stamp on political violence when they pardoned every single person who did the most egregious act of political violence that anyone can even remember who's alive today. The most aggressive sedition in American history, arguably, since the Civil War. And all those people got convicted, jail time, pardoned, done. But here's another part of the clip.
Tell me why he cannot.
Why
tell
would you
his
expect
side
anybody,
to calm down.
Destiny?
You can't answer that. Can you answer that question? Why can't
Can
Trump
you
go on
answer
TV
this
and say,
question?
all of us should be less violent?
Why do you
can't
think?
Trump say that?
Why do you
Why
think?
is your behavior contingent on Donald Trump?
Insane right now.
Why do you
is
think?
your
No, let me
behavior
ask a
contingent
question.
on Donald Trump?
Let me
Why
ask
is
a
that?
question.
Because he's the president of the United States of America and the leader of the opposing
Destiny.
political party.
Destiny. Let me
You
just.
have a huge audience of young men who
I'm a
listen to
YouTuber
everything you have to
who
say.
has more
So
young
when
men
you,
following
it
him.
doesn't
Who
matter.
has
You have a
more young-
huge
it doesn't
audience,
matter.
and because
This
of
is
the fact that you
world
have a
I'm
huge
living in,
audience,
and
you
you're
have.
Donald Trump
would have
shut up
come out
once,
and say-
please.
If Donald Trump would have come out
Destiny,
and say, hey, we should all be less violent,
Destiny,
I have no problem saying
I have one
absolutely.
question for you,
Why
Destiny.
can't conservatives do that? Why can't conservatives do that?
Destiny, I have a question for you. Why do you think in your campaign for everyone to dial down the temperature, why do you think that mocking the grieving widow of Charlie Kirk when she posts an image of her at the coffin side, why do you think that constitutes turning down the temperature?
You can't turn down the temperature on your own. The president of the United
You
States is
inflame the
not
temperature.
able
You're
to
mocking his
it's
widow.
already inflamed.
You're
What are you
mocking his
talking
widow.
about? We've had multiple political assassinations over the past year. What do you mean it's turning up the temperature?
Why did you mock his widow?
Online because
Why did you mock his widow?
Because she's being used as a political weapon right now
Wow.
for conservatives to continue their fight. What do you mean, wow? She's literally doing.
All right, this is where Destiny goes off the rails. You have no idea what Erica Kirk's intentions are. The very young person that she married and had kids with just died. You don't know what motivates her. Maybe the fact that her husband just got murdered, but the idea that she wants to grow TPUSA as some kind of legacy for Charlie Kirk, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with obviously condemning everything that happened and saying you support Erica Kirk and her family and said Charlie should have lived a lot longer. But people just underestimate, like we see Destiny's tweets there. Do you know how much Charlie Kirk turned up the temperature? If we're talking about temperature, there's two different kinds of temperature. There's the temperature of civilians doing stuff that's illegal, violent, etc. on their own, and then there's a temperature that comes from the top down. That is the kind of temperature that MAGA has introduced. And Charlie Kirk, yes, he's a civilian. Yes, he's highly connected, representative of the Trump administration. Believes in everything they say. Here is a clip of Charlie Kirk calling for the potential execution of Joe Biden.
A lot. I mean, Joe Biden is a bumbling, dementia-filled Alzheimer's, corrupt tyrant who should honestly be put in prison and or given the death penalty for his crimes against America.
This is where the modicum of truth in Destiny's argument actually kind of shines through. Because us random people at the bottom. Now, Destiny's not a random person at the bottom, by the way. So that's where his argument goes wrong. People like Destiny and Charlie Kirk are absolutely responsible for the temperature. People who are just voters and have opinions and have emotions are not. People at top making the laws, handling government, they are absolutely the most responsible for the temperature. That's why Donald Trump should absolutely say what Destiny thought. He should say that every single other official has said. And also, by the clip we just watched, Charlie Kirk was not one to turn down the temperature, and he was very much in a spot to do that. He commanded all of the youth. The youth are highly emotional. They listen to him. They listen to him say crazy things. Like we should militarily occupy every United States city. He refused to talk about and condemn January 6th when confronted about it on college campuses. He thinks Joe Biden, who never did any crimes, ever, he should be put to death for it. Like, this guy was not one to turn on temperature. Now, does that mean you can't condemn his murder? Of course not. And that's of course the thing that's wrong with Destiny's argument. Of course you should condemn the murder. People were friends with this guy, whatever. He had a family. He had many years left to live. But the idea that you should be saying it's the left's fault is so beyond the pale that it almost makes people like Destiny just like run to the complete other side of the argument, complete other side of the rhetoric, and refuse to condemn the act whatsoever. And that's why the right-wing response to this is so much more damaging than the majority of the left-wing response. Because the right-wing response is infectious all the way up to the top. The left-wing response is perfect at the top and semi-poisonous, semi-toxic at the bottom. These civilians who are not responsible for the temperature whatsoever, who think that the murder of Charlie Kirk is a great political development in the United States, right? Who think that it was worth the moral hemorrhage to have his life taken from him at the age of 31, right? But we have these right wing people way at the top who will not call for peace. They say this is the left's fault. Making comparisons, doing speech, that's the left's fault. No, it's your fault for having horrible politics. Why have we gotten here? What has changed? If you have a functioning system and you add in you change a variable, and then everything suddenly becomes worse. You have arguably an insurrection according to two state courts, right? You have violent seditionists. You have a president who did 4 major scandals, at least twice as big as Watergate if you add all of them up. In just like 6 years, 5 years, who's turning down the temperature, right? I mean, and I don't even talk about the Minnesota lawmakers because that's just a random conservative, mentally ill person. He had a list of like moderate Democrats he wanted to kill. But to be honest, it doesn't matter. Like I don't blame the right for that. I don't think that had anything to do with the broader temperature. That was his own thing. Right? We have to separate the Luigi Mangionis and the Tyler Robinsons from what's happening at the top. And that is what's the most important. Because even though we can't control those people, you can control what you say about them. And one side has done a lot better job at saying the right words. And that has been, of course, the Democrats.